So this is a short story called Liminal Space, and I figured I would read it. Your name is unimportant, but your mentor of 16 years is dead. He died peacefully, in his sleep, and you haven't cried, because crying isn't really how you do things. You move forward, marching ahead as though everything can be fixed with elbow grease and a bit of grit and determination. It's better to live that way. You're teaching at the same school as your mentor taught in. Everyone refers to you as president or prez, despite it being an unofficial title. The school superintendent is a woman maybe 10 to 15 years your senior with a watered-down blonde bob that's always blow-dried and set in place with hairspray and a pinched, patronizing expression. You think she works extra hard to make that expression for you because you pretend you don't see it. But it's simply better to live that way. You've been working in this school for a long time, long enough that for some reason people listen to you, but not long enough that you've earned a physical state of seniority that demands respect from those younger. This, of course, ticks off anyone who actually does have that type of seniority, and you wish you had an answer for the old coots that give a damn, but you don't. You listen a lot, and your face doesn't change, so it's sort of like having a loyal statue around. No one has to be afraid that you'll judge them. It's nice. You heard Mags from the theater department tell you, and you just nodded. There's this flurry of movement, like a pot's been stirred when your mentor dies, because he was loved. He was loved for good reasons for a long time. You're drawing up plans for some celebration for his death, and the superintendent does not like that. It's her job, after all. You're horning in on everything she can and should do. Just a whelp in their late 20s, the edge of a ballpoint caught between their top and bottom row of teeth, tapping each of your fingers against your thumb in turn, because you've never planned a party before. Let alone one for a dead man. You've got this knack for making anyone that talks to you feel like the most important person in the room. Makes you a good teacher. It's hard not to respect that. And those words had come from Malik, who works in the music department. But you're not really a person you've ever considered charismatic. You're mostly silent and stilted, so you prefer to listen to what other people tell you. You don't judge because you can't, really. You're too much of a mess inside for that. Not that anyone hears about it much. Except for your cell phone, which has the phrase, "how to plan funeral" in the Google search engine. But everything is expensive, and the superintendent will have a problem with that. You stare down at your blank notepad and put down your pen. Your mentor was the sort of person that told a lot of jokes, but never at anyone else's expense. The sort of person that was encouraging and kind and patient. The sort of person that felt like you knew you were loved when you were around him, so he never actually had to say it. Which is good for you, because you have trouble knowing what the word love means. But you loved him, in the way you knew how. You go to the superintendent and tell her that it'd be best just to have the wake in the auditorium or somewhere in the building, and she casts you a scornful glance laden with skepticism that you do not react to because there's no point in reacting. Eventually she gives up and drops the pretense, leaning onto her desk with her chin nestled onto the webbing between her forefinger and thumb, fake red nails biting crisply into the sagging skin of her left cheek, and says, "Art is dead, Prez. He served the school for a good long time, and we're thankful for that. We put out a statement in the paper, but we teach children. They're not here to learn about what death means. They're here to learn basic American history, how to add and multiply numbers, or how to read and write. They're children. They forget things so quickly. Arthur was a good man and a good teacher, but we can't expend resources on a surface that no one wants to come to. I'm not a monster for not wanting to embarrass the man in death." You want to say that you remember, and that the whole reason you chose to teach at the school was because you wanted to work in his old office. And why did you say it was old? He died recently. His office was recently opened, but you want to say that you remembered him as a kid, and that's why you came back. You want to say it, but you don't. You don't say anything, and the superintendent stares at you with a gaze mingling expectation and exasperation. You still aren't saying anything. Until you tell her that you don't have to delve into the school's funds for money and that it won't be an elaborate affair to begin with. You just feel like everyone deserves to be remembered. You just feel like death should never be the moment that your presence begins to slide down on a statistics graphic where the number of people who remember you begin to drop more and more the longer the people that knew you live. And why do people forget how important it is to feel important? The superintendent sighs and tells you she'll concede to your terms. Just leave her out of it as much as possible, and you say sure, without any inflection behind the monosyllabic response, and she glides back to her desk in a rolling chair, and the two of you don't exchange another word. You call up old students and people that knew your mentor, that girl Abby that was in your English class that had a black belt at the age of 10, and Tyler, a boy that had always been kind of neurotic, that you stood up for a lot because you could ping the bruises on his body, and you knew pretty well what an abused child looked like. Nathan, who you'd always liked because he had a clever fox-like face and a lot of freckles, made a lot of jokes. Liza, a girl who always had a wrapped braid in her hair and who loved Australia. Savannah, who grew up to be a real pill, possibly igniting your prejudice against blondes in your youth, but you summon her too. And then you send out an email to your coworkers asking if they'd pitch in $5 to $8 each just to get some refreshments and to put up a banner. It's not much. Not much from them, not from you, and not for your mentor, but it's enough. It's enough because other departments are offering to make decor, like Mag's coming up with several kooky art installments, or Malik offering to play piano, or Aria from the main office offering to make cupcakes. And they all say the same thing with minor variations. Anything you need, Brez. And you bow your head and murmur your gratitude because you don't really know what else to say. You got enough money to reserve a community center rather than some spot in the school, so you can make it look a little nicer. And there's a proper podium that people can read off of. You're approached by a lot of people that you either don't know or don't remember well in the morning of this whole affair, one of which being Liza, the girl who had sat next to you in science while you were both young. She has the same wrapped braid in her hair that she had when you were kids, and when you ask about it, she shrugs and says, "People usually remember one good trait about you, so it's kind of best to use it to your advantage." And you purse your lips together and nod, averting your eyes because she could probably tell the reason you remembered her was because of that same wrapped braid. Mags had put up some strange decorations, these lantern-looking things made of thread embedded with glitter that are wrapped around empty paper towel rolls, and yet they aren't cylindrical, they're cubic. You don't understand how that works. "I thought they suited him," Mag said simply. "You take the empty roll, and you use your fingers to make a square around the roll. Wind the string tight around your fingers, and then loop the thread in the creases where the corners should be. Didn't cost me a dime. I have a lot of thread. I tried to take up sewing and knitting, but I sucked at it, so I just have all this yarn lying around. I put some fake candles in the middle, hung them up. They look nice, right? Maybe I should open an Etsy shop." Your mentor would have liked Mags. You rephrase that in your head. Your mentor liked Mags, but he didn't get to know her very well, and he probably could have liked her more if he had. Your mentor liked the word kooky, because he liked strange sounds and uncommon words, so the pair of you would go back and forth and come up with different ones. Every time you would find a new word, you would say it and follow it up with its definition, and then, because it was tradition, one of you had to say, "It's a good one, right?" And the opposite person always had to agree. That's just how it was. You get a phone call from the superintendent that you accidentally invited her niece to the wake, Savannah, and that you really should have told her because now she has to go to the celebration of your dead mentor's life. You tell her that you didn't think that two people with the same last name were automatically related, and she huffs a noise over the phone that tells you an audible indication that she's rolled her eyes, so you just don't react to it. "I don't know where the community center is, and my husband took our SUV, so I can't plug it into maps. Meet me at the metro station near the school. I'll take the train with you." She doesn't give you an option, so you sound an assent, and she hangs up. You turn to Aria, who made some magnificent cupcakes, using several boxes of funfetti cake mix and dark food coloring, and ask if she can hold down the fort. And she smiles at you with this knowing sympathy and pats your shoulder. So you take the train back to the school where you teach and where your mentor taught before he died and where the superintendent is waiting, in black clothing and a knockoff handbag, patting down her blonde hair, which is unnecessary because she uses hairspray from the theater department, and nothing short of divine intervention would be able to knock her coif loose. You board the yellow line with her, and she stands several meters away so that she can pretend she doesn't know you, and you're spared from having to make uncomfortable conversation. You just peer straight ahead to the window seat in front of you, which is basically a mirror, while the train speeds through an underground tunnel, and you see yourself. You don't remember looking this way. Your hair is dark brown and your eyes are kind of sunken, and you've got the pinched appearance of a person that's lost a lot of weight in a short amount of time. You don't ever remember considering yourself attractive, so it isn't a surprise that you don't think so now. But you don't recognize that person in your reflection. The superintendent is occasionally shooting you a scowl of irritation, but you don't react. It's silent, aside of the clunking clatter of the train and the jostle of purses plopped beside of the riders on empty seats so that they don't have to sit next to a stranger and clumsily grumble when they reach their stop, so that they can perform that awkward shuffle where the person on the outer seat hugs their calves closer to themselves so the person on the inner seat can slide by with their rear most likely grazing the elbows of that stranger. You glance at the superintendent. She doesn't really like you. You don't really know what you did for that to be the case. And you finally switch from the yellow line to the red, and after 2 more stops you get off, trudging out of the station and walking 3.5 blocks to the community center, where the superintendent finds Savannah, her niece, and thrusts out her arm in a display of dramatic support before pulling the other woman into an air hug that suggests the superintendent doesn't actually want anyone else to touch her. You shake hands with everyone who shows up and squirt hand sanitizer on your palms afterwards. Mags and Malik are chatting. Mags has a rain stick to use along with Malik's somber music, and he works out of the instrument, and there are dark streamers dangling from the ceiling along with those slender cubic lanterns that Mags wants to try selling on Etsy. Everyone greets you as Prez, or President, because that's just what they call you, and there are other students and teachers that speak at the podium, and you watch, eating a cupcake that might be staining your mouth gray, because you have a sober realization while you're at this meager example of love you had for your mentor. You don't really know any of these people, and they most certainly don't know you. Hey, Prez, can you say a few words? You knew him best, so... Malik utters to you while the superintendent is giving a business-like speech, and you don't really know how to answer, so you shrug and finish your cupcake and wash it down with a few mouthfuls from the nearby water fountain, and suddenly the piano and the rain stick are making sounds again, and people are staring at you, and even though there's music, you feel like it's very quiet. You don't know whether it's a peaceful kind of silence or a tense one, but it doesn't matter much, so you walk to the stage and walk under the hot spotlight and stand rigidly behind a podium where the superintendent left her flashcards that told her what to say when it was her turn. Everyone is waiting for you. It makes your mouth feel like you've never spoken before. My name is... Well, it's not important. You can call me S, or ST, or Prez. Hi. I teach English. You wave your hand. My mentor was the first person who cared about what I had to say. He was a good teacher. A good man. I think when you're a teacher, your students don't know everything about your life. It's a job where you have to act a lot. But you don't get paid as an actor. But he was good. Whatever he was acting, he was good. I'm sorry he's gone. And you move to get off the stage, but you stop. You can't really just march ahead here with elbow grease and a bit of grit and determination. You can't really pretend you don't see what's going on either. It's not always better to live that way, because it's not really living to do that. And your mentor is already dead. I'm sorry he's gone, you repeat. He's been dead for 13 years. You turn back to the podium. Sometimes I wonder how I could have grown up if he hadn't died. I never had an abundance of solid role models. I wonder if I'd be a teacher instead of a train wreck, but he always told me to write, and so I do. the people watching in the audience are just smiling blandly. The good thing about writing is that it keeps existing after you die. I wish he would have written, because I would have had concrete evidence that art was a real person that existed, and I'd have something that he wrote with his own two hands as proof. And I'd be able to read it over and over again and think, I'm so glad I have this, because it would be a sign of love. I believe in ghosts and a lot of things that aren't tangible, so I shouldn't be the sort of person that demands a physical memento as a representation of everything a person meant to me, but I am, because my memory is fallible, and I don't want to get old myself one day and find out I forgot his face. I still remember his laugh and his smile, and I remember the way he parted his hair, and I remember the singing fish he had on the wall of his classroom and the box of prizes he had in the corner of the room when he felt a student did something really outstanding. I remember feeling seen around him because he was an honest teacher, even though I was really young. He didn't praise me for no reason. He called me a flower child, sometimes or changeling, something strange and quirky and a little unfocused, and I remember the last day I saw him and he gave me a hug, and I remember the day that I learned he died. I remember Nathan and Abby and Savannah and Liza and Tyler, but I remember imprints of who we were as children. And I remember that I always remember how I dream of him in summertime, even though he died in fall. My memory of him is too warm for October, so I displace it somewhere that makes more sense. I wonder if I'm called president because it means preside over in Latin. And I sort of saw him as a person that presided over me, and maybe I wish I could be like that instead of dreaming of a community center by myself. The community center is dark now, and the guests are gone, and you're alone. You sit on the edge of the stage because you don't know how else to react. You're good at waiting. You've waited for something for many years without even knowing where that something is. You're just waiting to wake up. Whether you're dreaming, or sleeping, or awake, you're just waiting to wake up. But there is one person in the community center, other than yourself, a person that you only catch for a fleeting moment, who's half obscured in the shadow of the room, because the illusion you're in is shattered, and that means the dream is losing its integrity. But you catch just enough of him, and he doesn't have a blank expression, and he doesn't look past you. You remember his smile, and the part of his hair, and the suit he wore when you last saw him. He smiles at you, crooked teeth and crinkled eyes, and lifts his hand as if he's both greeting you and saying goodbye at the same time. And you react with the time you have left to wave back. You feel the need to cry, and with the time you have left, you do. This moment is liminal, a passage between the time that came before and the time that will come. A moment where you wait, and a moment where you choose to act. Because soon you wake up, and you've crossed that bridge, and it's burning behind you so that you can't go back. Your name is unimportant, but your mentor of 16 years has been dead for 13 of them. But he's still your mentor. He'll be your mentor until that bridge opens up for you again, so you can cross, and you'll meet all over. And behind you, there may be someone else waiting as your bridge turns to cinders, and perhaps they'll throw you awake in a community center sometime in summer with guests that are mere memories of people they used to know. And in that moment, maybe you'll stand in an obscured corner of that liminal space for someone else, and you'll feel seen. But more importantly, so will they.